My name is David Lewis-Peart, and I am a speaker and a former minister. I work as a social worker and do talks around experiences that I would have once called spiritual, but now I just sort of call the human experience. And so this morning I was invited in by a former teacher and a good friend of mine, Reverend Barbara, to spend some time together. And so I ask for forgiveness in advance for any offense or any misstep or mistake or misspeak, trusting that it's all good. Everything must be, because it is. Before we get started, I'm going to just ask us all under the sound of my voice to just take a moment to center to ground. I think I need it too, so I'm going to extend it all to you. Is that okay? So wherever it is that you are, I'd like you to put your feet on the floor and your hands in your lap. And get yourself situated and comfortable. And if you feel all right with that, you can close your eyes or lower your gaze. Place your attention on your breath. Just follow and feel the in-breath, and just observe that out-breath. Pay attention to the next in-breath. Notice the coolness of the air up and through nostrils, the expanding of chest and abdomen, the rising of shoulders to greet the breath. And then, without any prompting, the breath as it just falls back out. Follow the next breath in. Let it sit a moment. And then just notice how it falls back out. Now, I'd like you to imagine that you were standing over your life, as if looking down on a long and winding road. And in your mind's eye, I want you to envision, as if it were, the different points along that long and winding road that is your life map. Give thought to all of those moments of significance, filled with joy and elation, happy memories, breakthroughs. But I'd also like you to give thought to, give attention to those moments that looked like and felt like at the time, like everything was falling apart. I want you to remember those moments that you've spoken of and those moments that nobody knows about, where you felt like you just could not make it through. A loss, a betrayal, an illness, a bill, some great expense on your life that at the moment, at that time, along that line, felt like it was the ending of you. And just observe how many of those moments are dotted along your life, your map, your path. And then notice, if you can, the space in between those points. Those moments that you felt like you were at your wit's end, where all things were falling apart and falling through, like it was the ending of you, and then those moments of elation and breakthrough, filled with joy and possibility. And for some, maybe that space between those 2 points is a vast expanse. For some of us, that space between those points felt like it would go on forever. For others, maybe it was just a momentary blip along the way. But just notice the space. Space almost like the space between the words in my sentences, the space between your inhalation and your exhalation, even the micro millimeter spaces between the bum in the seat and the chair. Just notice that there's space there. And where your attention goes, it grows. Darkness, be that fence around me. Pull me to your edges and let me linger in your presence. Absence, be that fence around me. Pull me to your edges and let me linger in your presence. Stillness, be that fence around me. Pull me to your edges and let me linger in your presence. Silence, some years ago, I was invited by a friend and colleague to do a TED Talk, or really a TEDx talk. Not as grand, but equally as exciting for my 20-something-year-old self. I chose a topic focused on some of the work that I had been doing for that time and my graduate research at York University, where I'd been leading this investigation of interventions working with young Black men like myself, looking at health and sexual identity and risk and HIV risk primarily, but also risk to a host of other things. The aim of the research was to really identify if through these community interventions, this sort of work with these young men, that we could curb their vulnerability to HIV and other risks. It was a great opportunity for a young social work professional and novice researcher. Um, at the end, I worked with about 200 other young men. And one of the things that came out of that time was a lot of stories of these men and their lives, oftentimes really full of a lot of very difficult things that they'd overcome. And while my initial focus had been looking at their susceptibility to risk, one of the things that I was finding more and more of was how much I was identifying just the great wealth of resiliency that so many of these men had, and how it stood in stark contrast to the things that I was reading in research reports and public health documents about this vulnerable group that, if I was honest, that I also was a part of, right? I was a young man of color, a gay man, and a lot of the things that the young men that I was working with and was seeing were things that I too had moved through in some ways, challenges that I'd overcome. But I'd gone in with this expectation to find all of these deficits. And in some ways I did. A lot of the things that they had struggled through and were continuing to struggle through. But I also found these deep wells of resilience and resourcefulness and an ability to overcome. It led me to coin a term for what I was observing, and it was called the prophetic performance. And I was led to read to you this big word salad that I had written for some graduate paper about the prophetic performance. But I believe in the KISS principle: keep it simple, stupid. And instead, we'll just say that the prophetic performance, in sum, was just this idea that for many, we think of performance as a putting on of a mask, and that's true. But there's another kind of performance, that the prophetic performance, that comes when the mask that we wear drops and something else emerges through. Oftentimes, things that we were unfamiliar with, ways of being and showing up, and ways of knowing that sort of confound our own comprehension. But it's the knowing that you know, and the doing that draws from this knowing that sometimes even surprises you. And what I was finding was that so many of the folks that I was meeting had these moments of prophetic performance, of breakthrough, where despite their circumstance and situations, despite their vulnerabilities and risks, they were able to make a way, or at least it seems that they were able to make a way. I'm going to share with you a poem that I wrote in relation to this, and then I'm going to go into a little bit of what the actual topic is today, which is getting a grip on grace. Our future needs prophets, not princes. Those that can usher in by way of sin and the sinewy celebration of bodies in descent, not scribes. Boys, them Banji, Bougie, and Bati, black balls fell out and calling out ancestors from dance floors turned runway. Snapbacks and snap fingers trigger a refigure of masculinity. Over sounds of pastors speaking in tongues and tyranny, our future needs prophets, not princes. Those slain in and drunk off spirits, perhaps not sovereign, but Holy Ghost sanctified. Picassos of a different kind, painting canvases black like clenched fists, blue like b-boys and colored contacts, oozing red remainders into queer ribbons tied tenuously to times torn apart and futures reproductive. Temporal temples made of melanin and built on margins by poets, PhDs, pansies, and porn stars. Those prophetic performers of every disorder. Our future needs prophets, not princes. Grace is a big part of my life and story. So much so that I share with people all the time that I literally have it tattooed on my body. Actually, I have two tattoos. One says grace is greater, and the other says everything. And grace has been a big feature of my own personal story in life, but it's also become a big part of my work. And it's interesting, as I was preparing for sharing today, I got a call from a friend about a week or so ago. This friend had been moving through some really difficult times in the past couple of years and had listened to a talk that I had given about grace some while ago. And this friend was in this moment of reflection. They spoke about this place that they were in as being very reflective, but also being a bit paradoxical. They talked about feeling strong and also weak, feeling alone, but also in the presence of so many, feeling like they were broken down and couldn't break through, but also that they had a way through. This feeling of so much, but struggling to find the words. And this friend said to me, it's grace, David, but why? What's the purpose? This outcome, my life, should not have been, and yet it was. And so why? Why me? And I don't know about you, but sometimes, people ask you questions that are bigger, like big questions, And sometimes we offer up sometimes really trite answers. And my response to this particular friend was, because you're deserving. I want us to bookmark that idea of deserving. And so this friend continues, but why? Why am I deserving? Why does the universe, why does God, why does life love me so much when on the ground there are so many who don't? And we continued in our dialogue a bit, and this person ended off sharing a commitment that they had made some years back when they were moving through the most challenging of their times. And they had said that they had made a promise that if they made it through, and when they made it through, that when people asked, they would give the answer that downloaded to them, that it was the higher, the higher. And so I've been reflecting on that friend's reflection, and it brought me to today. And a lot of what I'm going to share today, I think, will also be a bit of prophetic performance. I'm allowing the mask to drop for me, and whatever is to emerge authentically as best it can. So let's begin with grace. What is it that we're talking about by grace? And whenever you want to get into a good definition, you pick up a book and you figure out where it all comes from. And so our good friends at Oxford English in the dictionary offer that grace is a noun, can be a noun, meaning simple elegance or refinement of movement, or a courteous goodwill. As a verb, it's understood as to do honor or credit to someone or something by one's presence. In the Britannica, they offer up grace as understood through a theological lens, particularly Christian. And they capture it as the spontaneous, unmerited gift of divine favor in the salvation of sinners, and the divine influence operating in individuals for their regeneration or sanctification. So some of the points that I've taken away from some of these sort of verbose offerings is that grace is active. It moves. It's a courtesy. It's a gift bestowed. And it's one that's bestowed for those who have missed the mark. And finally, and most importantly, it's the opportunity to begin again. So I asked you to bookmark my response to my friend earlier in the week, and this idea of because they were deserving. And I actually want to trouble that notion, that idea of one being deserving or entitled. And I'd offer that grace is by its nature opposite to that. It has nothing to do with things that we're entitled to or deserving of. That in fact, actually, if we were to understand grace, we would understand it as a couple of things. One, grace is always out of order. Two, it's often outmatched. And three, and finally, it's always out of reach. In Isaiah 55, verses 8 through 9, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than yours, your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. This idea of out of order. On a human level, on the egoic level, we like rules. We like order. We're focused on formula, what makes sense. We're also focused on things being equitable. That's a big word right now. Or equal. We're also focused on what we can acquire, can be held in hand and be grabbed a hold of or known. And grace often troubles all of those things. Grace does not follow order. It doesn't follow rules. It's often outmatched. It is a gift that is bigger than us and better than us and what we, quote unquote, deserve. It doesn't measure and match. It doesn't go toe to toe. And it's not able to be grabbed hold of and understood in that way. Anything known cannot be understood. And a good understood is a good undervalued. When I think about grace, I think about good. I think about this higher order good. Not the kind of good that's sort of focused on tally systems, but the ones that catch us by surprise. I think of it almost like this. Think about a time that you've gotten a gift. It's almost like those those Christmas activities that they do at work that everyone can't stand, Secret Santa, and they tell you you can't spend any more than $15. We never really seem to enjoy those gifts quite that much. It's always those gifts that come to us when we're least expecting them. Those gifts that we didn't really work for or sign up in any work staff list for, but that catch us, by surprise and unaware. They're often more than what we had asked for, or even sometimes what we think that we are entitled to. And they always feel sort of out of reach, almost better than, bigger than I can grab hold of. And that's what makes grace so special an offering, is that you don't have to work. You don't have to try, you don't have to effort. And there's nothing that you can do to bring it about. And I think that that's also countercultural for the moment that we're in. The algorithms are what you put in is what you get back. And grace says, I don't care what you put in. That you can't bank on this. And that you can't get to this through performing, through placing on a mask. You can only get to this through the dropping of it. Grace comes to you, not when you're beating on your chest and demanding that it show up. I put in the work. Grace comes to you when you've hit the floor and your knees and you said, I give up. I give up. We began with that little meditation, an invitation to sort of follow the timeline of your life. And one of the things that I was asking you to do was to give thought to all of those things that you have come through and overcome, the ones that you've spoken about and the ones that you haven't. And I was really intentional about inviting us to do that because there are things that those of us under the sound of my voice have overcome that no one has ever heard about. In fact, actually, some of the best evidence of where grace has shown up has been in the parts of our lives that we keep the most hidden and secret. I don't deserve this good. If you knew what I did when I was 2, if you heard what my ex-wife said about me, if you know what I did to the person that I called a friend, I don't deserve this. But grace says that my good is higher than your good. See, on the human level, good is about a tit for tat. Good is focused on a performance. It's almost like niceness. Good on the human level is about like being nice. And there's lots and lots and lots of people who are nice, but are not kind. Nice is concerned with the external, what it looks like, what it sounds like, and what other people see or know. It's like those people who take pictures of themselves giving sandwiches to homeless people so that they can post it on social media. That's a human understanding of good. But my ways are above your ways. My thoughts are above your thoughts. The good that I am directed by, the good that I am, isn't interested in the show. And so when I think back to the moments of grace that have shown up in my life, it's for those moments that have been the darkest, for the things that I can barely even wrap my mouth around to say out loud. And it's there, it's only there that God, your good, the highest good, can show up. It's only there where God, your good, grace can show up. It's in that space between who I am and all of its limitations, all of its confusion, all of its focus on all of the wrong things, all of its humanness, and this divine aspect that we are all in relationship to, but that we continually forget. And it makes sense because, when we're in the human form, in our humanness, sometimes we think our good means the title that we've gotten, reverend, doctor, father, mother, whatever, or the things that we've acquired, right? The things that we know in the intellect. A philosopher that I'm quite a fan of, Alan Watts, talks about beware the goody-goodies. Beware the goody-goodies. Beware the people who are consumed with their own ideas of their good because they read the right book or performed the right rituals or went to the right schools or were born in the right country with right practices. Beware those people who think that they know what they know, who beat on their chest and let everybody know how good they are. There's a different kind of good, a higher order good that shows up when all of those external things fall away. And oftentimes those external things only fall away when we fall to the floor, when we're forced. I'm good because I don't lie. I don't cheat. I don't steal. And then one day you step out on your partner. And where does your good go then? There's some of us clinging to ideas of good that are incomplete and partial, if not all out lies. There's some of us who are consumed with the performance of holier than thou. And in the performance of holier than thou cannot get in line with the holy, which is holy. WHOLLY. It is all things. It is the good that shows up when you are doing the right rituals and practices, or when you hit the bottle, even though you said that you've given it up. Shut up, I say. What about that good then? With the needle in your arm. What about that good then? Grace is the space that we are given and that we must accept in order to extend it to others. The space to be fully human and all of what that means. The missteps, the misspeaks, the mistakes, and the messy. And trusting in the space that something higher than I will show up and transform and transmute the smallest of me but only when I can let go, only when I can surrender. And some of us, like me, are hard-headed, and surrender doesn't come easy. It's not a, here I am, God, here I am, life. We fight, we toil. My father, whom I love, and I love my dad. He's still with us. But I remember him as a child. He was an imposing force of a man. It was kind of when he came to the front door from work, you shook a little bit in your boots. He was an imposing man. And now he is an elder man. And health and age and all those things. The other day we were on the phone call and he says, David, once a man, twice a child. Isn't that an awesome gift for those of us who get that? Because it's as children that we can come to know and to truly understand. I have never had the kind of father that is the most kind and the most generous and the most open as I have in my elder father. When he can no longer rely on his brute strength or his wisdom or the women. It's just him alone with source. And in that space, grace showed up and healed our relationship. Grace showed up and built a bridge. Grace showed up and transformed and transmuted what was once a difficulty into a blessing. That's what grace does. But it can only do that when we allow it. And some of us will do that willingly and others will do that with a fight, but all of us must do. The question is, when and where will you allow the space to show up? When and where will you allow the space to show up? I invite those of you on this call and those who will be hearing my voice at some later time to think about your relationship with grace, the transforming power of grace. And, I speak from this place as someone who's stepped outside of religion. I'm not one who's consumed by religiosity. I believe that grace is something that is really human. Grace is a space that everywhere around us, we are surrounded by space. Even our cells, the seeming solidity of us is informed by that space. And I invite all of us to really sit with and meditate in on that space that we're given, that life gives us, to be human and all of what that means. And yet, in that space, to also transform and transmute that. I want you to think about the worst of you, not the best of you. I want you to think about the parts most undeserving of good. And I want you to shine a light of awareness on it. You don't have to tell anybody. You can be alone in your room and writing in a journal, but I want you to capture not the best of you, but the worst of you. And I want you to write it all down. And then I want you to draw a big fat circle around it. And that's the circle like in the poem that I offered up in the beginning of this talk. Be that fence around me. Pull me to your edges and let me linger in your presence. God, good, the still, the quiet, the dark, the unknown. Surround my smallness at this time. Fill me with that space that transforms and transmutes. Do not let me get too high up on my own supply. Do not let me get too high on my own supply. I am not that special or important. I am a measly little thing in this universe, and yet I'm still special to you. But only when I let the mask drop and allow you to show up and show through. The first time that the word grace is used in the Bible is in the story of Noah in Genesis. Noah, understood as a prophet by the Muslims, his name also means rest. That the world was consumed with sin and fallenness, and the Lord was ready to smite it all. and then rest. And he said, all right. Only after the space given, only after the rest, was there a new beginning allowed to happen. And that's what the water signifies, a cleansing, a starting again, and a starting over. I'm going to leave you with this before I end. Many of you might be familiar with the Lord's Prayer, but it actually comes from Aramaic. And my eldest brother shared with me the translation in Aramaic that I wanted to share with you before I end off. And I want you to let the words of its original intent to resonate. And for those of us who think that we're familiar with the Lord's Prayer, isn't it interesting? What we think that we know and we think that we understand keeps us from what is really there to be known. And so, our Father who art in heaven, O birther, Father, Mother of the cosmos, you create all that moves in light. Hallowed be thy name. Focus your light within us. Make it useful as the rays of a beacon show the way. Thy kingdom come. Unite our I can to yours so that we walk as kings and queens with every creature. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Create in me a divine cooperation from many selves, one voice, one action. Give us this day our daily bread. Grant what we need each day in bread and in insight. And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Forgive our hidden past, the secret shames, as we consistently forgive what others hide. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Lead us not into temptation, forgive me, but deliver us from evil. Let us not be deceived neither by the outer nor the inner. Free us to walk your path with joy. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. From you is born all ruling will, the power and the life to do, the song that beautifies all. From age to age, it renews. Amen. Amen. Amen.